So, hello and welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast with me, Pascal Steve, and on the other end is Steve Hall. This time I just keep it very, very simplistic with the intro. No fanciness or so, just so that we aren't messing up the intro. So how are you doing, Steve?
I'm good. Yeah, the more I talk to... It's a really weird realization that I feel like I've had recently where I feel like sometimes my brain just... I have nothing in there to say. I'm like, man, some people can just speak and they have so much like things they can just pick up on and just talk about. And I'm like, sometimes I feel like, what is my brain doing? Like, it's just, I've got no memories anymore.
What was kind of the moment where you thought that this is the case? Who was the trigger?
I think it was the actual seminar. Like in social interactions, I'm not, I guess, actually, this is funny because I think if you were to speak to someone like Charlotte or like Cameron, my best friend, they would be like, you talk a lot. Whereas and they'd be like, you have plenty to say, don't worry about it. Whereas I find maybe when I'm not as comfortable with someone or if it's in a slightly different situation, I find myself kind of, I withdraw and then I get anxious that I don't have things to say. And then I'm like, right, I'll just be very succinct with my words. So I think sometimes I get that a little bit on podcasts. You think I'd be over that by now. But when I'm interviewing someone who maybe I haven't spoke to in a long time, I could actually say this for Martin yesterday, and he just has so much to say and so much knowledge to pull out, which is great. But sometimes I find actually it happens with, I think it's normally with guests who have a lot to say. I then find myself having... Yeah, good example, because this is exactly who I was thinking of. He has so many, he makes so many points, and so I've got one thing going through my head, another thing going through my head, and I'm like, oh, I could have talked about that, and maybe I need like to make a note down here, and then I can like read through them, but it doesn't come across as like smooth and fluent. So I then maybe say one thing out of like 10 things that run through my head. I'm like, oh damn, Steve, why can't your brain just work succinctly through this like list of things that you'd been building up? But yeah, it came due to the seminar where I don't know, you interact with like someone like Mike and he just has like so much to say. And even in social situations like Coach Harry Smith, I remember when I think both of us were quite tired, but we went out for dinner and he was just like almost the center of attention at that. And he just has so much to say. I'm just like, man.
At the Iraqi restaurant, right?
Yes, at the Iraqi restaurant.
I know exactly what it is that you're referring to. And I can talk for myself. I was very, very tired by that point.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm just happy to sit here and
let someone else take it. Yeah. So I don't even know why that came to mind, but I think I think for me, it's just like a general confidence thing as I get more confident in myself and just, and not being worried and that was like for the presentation I found if I made a mistake, no one really notices. Like I remember many mistakes that I made in that presentation and I just kind of, normally I'd really overthink them. But that time I just kind of made a joke out of it. Like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I'll carry on.
But I think that this is just like normal, to be honest. Some people, they are more so introverts. Some people are extroverts. And depending on what type of person you are, you will flourish in certain situations, and certain other situations you will just like be a little bit more for yourself. Right?
Yeah. I think it is funny. Just obviously, I've been watching Obi-Wan Kenobi. I watched an interview with Hayden Christensen.
I've heard bad things about it.
Yeah, if you are a true Star Wars fan, I think you'll be disappointed. If you're just enjoying Star Wars because it's Star Wars, you'll enjoy it.
That's what I heard, that people actually complained that there was such big hype around it, that it's Obi-Wan, and then in the end, it's not really about Obi-Wan. That there are even some kind of the first couple of episodes where you barely see him at all.
To be fair, he's in it quite a lot, but it's not like you're not following his journey, really. You're kind of following other characters' journey. It's not really about him. So anyway, it's sad. But I saw an interview with like Hayden and with, Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, or Anakin and Obi-Wan. And it's just funny because Hayden's he's quite reserved. He doesn't say too much. He almost comes across like a little bit awkward, whereas like, I forgot, who's the guy who plays Obi-Wan again? That's the one, Ewan McGregor. He's like, just really clearly very extroverted, like really out there, and it's like, oh man, I'd be so the guy sitting there being like Anyway,
but I think that's just normal that in a situation like this, someone takes over the leading role. That is also something that Katie and I have discussed, because whenever she's in a situation at work, for example, there's no one actually then stepping in to be that authoritative figure, she's actually then taking on that role, even though that she's not someone who thinks of herself highly in terms of a leading position. And she just takes it on because it's like someone needs to take up that role, right? And I think that this is often the case in many, many situations, that someone is then kind of the leading factor. Yeah. Also, when it comes to, I don't know, something is happening, instead of everyone standing around, one person then steps up and just like says, "Guys, we have to go this way now."
This is
I don't know. I can only think of some kind of movie situations where there's kind of an incident or accident going on at the moment. I don't know, the walls, they're falling apart, and everyone is kind of in that shock period, frozen. And someone is just like saying like, "We have to go now."
I think many relationships have this dynamic. So like with me and Charlotte, she will always be the one that like, she'll do like, I don't know, she'll talk to the person that comes, knocks at the door and wants something, or like whatever it is, she'll be that person that kind of takes that leading position, and I sit back. Or in like, I guess with us, when we do things, you often are the one like taking that position. And I think what I need to get better with is just accepting that that's what I'm like, and that's my nature, and that's like, I have other skills, whereas I think I put pressure on myself because I want to be that person. And I think it's also good to put myself in that situation sometimes. But yeah, it's an interesting one, because it's like, do you want to just accept like who you are, and that's how you act and behave, and that's what makes you comfortable? Maybe I need to put myself out of my comfort zone sometimes. I think that's important too.
For me, it's actually quite funny, because I don't really like to be in the center position. I've even talked about it in the past, right? But I position myself often in that position because, and now here's the conflict that I'm dealing with myself. I don't really like to be there in center. However, I also hate giving away control, and I hate it when things don't go according to my plan. And this is, of course, a personal trait that is sometimes a problem, sometimes actually a positive thing. But in those situations, that one thing overpowers or overweighs the other thing, basically, right? I rather want things to go very much according to plan, or the way that I've scheduled things out, rather than them being or going down the drain. And I then take it on board to be that person to set foot into the center, even though I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah, no, I can see that and appreciate it. I don't know how we got onto that, but how are you?
Good. Yeah, no, can't really complain. Last week here of the training block.
Yeah.
So tomorrow is the last session before then actually going into a deload, going then away over the weekend. Just like small family trip. Nothing big though. Just like a southern from Berlin, like in Spreewald, which I've talked about back in the days already. Kind of that fairy tale land to some extent. I mean, that's at least how I imagine it to be. Whenever I'm there, it's just like beautiful weather, the small kind of river. It's not really a river. It's just like such a small kind of, it is a river, right? But it's so small and narrow that you can barely pass it with just like in one canoe, for example. It's amazing.
Oh.
And it's just amazing, and that is something that I'm very much looking forward to. And because I felt good, I've extended them the mesocycle, but now I'm actually getting to the point where I'm mentally drained, and not just like that. Physically, I think I could even push a little bit further. Don't know how productive it would still be, but it's not that I feel systemically super burned out or so. But mentally speaking, I'm just like, holy shit, I need a break, especially due to those weekends of like the London seminar and so.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting. I feel like I was a little bit nervous when we were talking last week, how I was feeling for like week 2. I was like, man, I'm feeling a bit tired here and a bit beat. Whereas this week, I almost feel like is now my week 2. I feel like I've had like a complete rejuvenation of energy since that weekend's gone. And I'm like, this actually for a week 3 is feeling really good. Like lifts are moving really smooth. So maybe
Yeah, I've seen that you did some nasty things on the hack squats even. That they felt. Yeah, I mean, it moved well, and you said that you've been quite surprised about then the performance there.
Yeah, I don't know if we've spoken about it on here, but I've definitely spoken about it to you at some point where, like, before that lift now, there's a few, it's mostly leg training, and hack squats are the worst for it, where I get a little bit kind of nervous and anxious for it. My heart rate starts elevating before that set, where I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to, like, I want to get the lift. I know I can do the lift, but I want to get it for a lower or higher, RAR. So like, that's what I'm nervous about. And so I've just got into a position now with it where I used to hype myself up quite a lot for it, but I don't know if you know, like, you get this, Pascal, where you get this like nervous energy where then like you almost feel like a bit shivery, like and you don't feel as in control, and you kind of potentially rush reps. For whatever reason, contractions don't feel as good. So I had to like just control my breathing a little bit more, and I started to pick songs when I do that lift that have like a rhythm to them, so like a beat, so I could almost kind of move with the beat rather than just songs that like completely riled me up and hyped me up. Yeah. So I think it was like a Death Note song I chose, and it just has a really nice rhythm, but it kind of gets me like hyped for it a little bit. And I just moved through the lift, and I kind of put less psychological energy towards it. So I finished the set yesterday, and I was like, like I finished that and I don't feel completely wrecked like I normally think I normally would. And even I put it up on and asked people what they thought the RAR was, and people were like, 2, maybe 3. And I'm like, oh man, if I had more than 2 in the tank, I'm really happy about that, because I mean, it's had real good progress. So
to be honest,
I don't know.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know if you have lifts like that where you get a bit anxious and nervous before it, and you kind of have to pull yourself back and like calm down.
I do. So 3 things. First, I think I very much like the idea about music and picking something with a rhythm. I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but do you know the scene from Spider-Man 3 with Tobey Maguire, where he's actually then being infected by Venom? Then he's actually then crossing down the street. There's some music on his headphones, and he's walking down and just like feeling overly confident. And in reality, probably from the outside, everyone would just like think, "Who's that idiot?" You know?
Yeah, he looks ridiculous.
deep down inside, he's like overly confident. And I think that I've had it myself as well, especially when I was still living in Berlin. Putting some headphones on right now, I'm always kind of listening to podcasts, not anymore to any kind of songs. But I had it back then that I was like putting on some headphones, and I was just like in the groove. And I'm also someone who's then kind of you can tell that I enjoy the music, right? And I very much like the approach of them picking a song that has a good rhythm to it, so that you can kind of like a musician actually be then always with just like the music, doing each and every single rep, which I never do, to be honest. I just use the music to kind of hype me up and to get me kind of riled up. And then when I do the set, I can't really listen to the music, right? I don't really notice that I have music on anymore. It's like everything's gone. Everything's empty. I have no thoughts. I'm not thinking about kind of cues or anything alike. It's just like focusing on the set, focusing on moving the weight, and focusing on feeling the exercise as well.
Do you normally have a rep target in mind when you're going into almost each and every set? Not always, but for those kind of the first set that you're doing.
So because people are then always like, okay, when you're then training to RER, when you have a rep target, isn't that kind of counteracting that? Not necessarily, right? Because you want to actually then improve over time. And realistically speaking, the lowest form of then progression could be something like reps. For the vast majority of people, I have like a hierarchy that I've thought about, and that is of course more of a generalized thing. And shit test me on that one, Steve. But I'm just thinking, because people are always like, okay, am I making enough progress, or is the progress not appropriate for my state of the level of a lifter who I am? I think beginners should, theoretically speaking, be able to progress from session to session. That could even be inside 1 week. Intermediates then from week to week. Advanced lifters then from mesocycle to mesocycle, and then highly advanced lifters, they should of course see some progression at least over a block or like a macro cycle. And that is of course a long time frame, but if you really think about it, if you're highly advanced, you don't really expect to see massive load progressions anymore, and even repetition targets could actually be hard to accomplish. What do you think about this?
I tend to have a very similar, but maybe slightly like have ranges to each of those. So like you said, like novices maybe can progress in a week. I might say in a week and then like weekly. And then I would say intermediates are like every week / every like couple of weeks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So like I just add like a range to it, but absolutely I like those ideas. I think
once again, it's just like a generalized idea where most people then fall into that spectrum. And of course, it's not like you're beginner and then you jump immediately to intermediate. You are kind of slowly transitioning from one over to the other, where then it's a gradual process of like, you should be able to progress like session to session, and then it should slow down that not each and every single session, but maybe only then, I don't know, 2 out of 3 for the week, and then up to the point of then only being able to progress weekly. And then you should already have one foot in the advanced stages of like maybe not weekly anymore, but mesocycle to mesocycle. But sometimes even on a session to session basis still, because you're 1 foot still in the beginner stages with the entire body kind of in the intermediate stages, and then with 1 foot or maybe just like 1 toe in the advanced stages already. Like just from a progression scheme, if you think about it.
Yeah, so if it all worked perfectly, you might find someone who, I don't know, as a novice, you could almost finish your mesocycle, your naught RAR lifts almost become like your 3 to 4 RAR lifts. In the next mesocycle, you can just literally jump up.
Yeah.
Whereas for anyone we work with, and for the vast majority of listeners, it's going to be more like, maybe you can use like the loads you used in week 2 and the reps you got in week 2 or in week 3 maybe, and use that in week 1.
Yeah.
I'm always looking to like get an extra rep or a little bit of load every mesocycle. I almost like,
me too.
I'm to the point where I'm like, I'm kind of stubborn to it, where I do try and a little bit force it, because I do find if I don't do that, I can get too, like at this point for us, it's all fucking hard. So I almost have to purposely like edge myself up. Otherwise I could just, like it's if you try and repeat the same RAR week to week, I'd just be like, man, I couldn't train like that. I need to almost force that little bit of extra, like just keep nudging me forward.
That's the thing, right? I think that you have to force it at some point, because otherwise you won't really progress. And that could even come at the cost of a slight deviation in form and technique. That doesn't mean that it's... See, people always have the idea that when it is that we are talking about perfect technique, that it always should look exactly the same. But of course, when you are trying to get into a new territory, you have to first and foremost look around and make yourself comfortable in that territory as well. And I always like to see it such as a video game. When you get to the next level and you've never played that level, first you have to get adjusted to that level, right? But the more often you do that, the easier it becomes. And then you can probably progress through that level and get to the next one. And it's hard at first, but it will become easier over time. But if you always stay on the same level, then you can't really expect that you're then making a massive leap forward.
Yeah. No, you have to test yourself now and then. Yeah. And again, like for us, we do that probably every mesocycle. We try and touch something that we've never done for that number of reps or whatever. And you see whether you like survive and you've adapted or you don't. But we get there in a very graduated, slow approach where we've got all those skills that we needed in the previous levels that should lead us to this next level and being successful. But it's like you said, you don't know until you go and try. And I think that's where people will do this horrible thing where they will kind of make stuff harder and then like, oh, my technique's like slightly shifted or whatever. It's still very good. And then they reduce loads and they're just in this no man's land and they just keep going up and down. And so you have to just catch yourself when you do that. Because I think I have been potentially starting to do that with my hip hinges and my straight leg deadlifts. Because I was just looking back at them and I was just like, man, Steve, your form was fucking good previously. Did you really need to like reset loads and go down? Or are you just trying to I'm not trying to find a way to make it easier, but it's just Are you just doing that, I don't know, just because you're too concerned about technique? Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
Very good point, because I think that, because you also brought up the question of like whether I'm always having a rep target in mind. Yes, I do. I'm going in there. I'm trying to challenge myself, of course. And then sometimes that also means that I'm overshooting my RER as well. But these are never kind of black and white outcomes. You do a set to the best of your abilities. And after the set, you're then thinking about what you could do better for the next time, maybe, right? And sometimes you hit it kind of bullseye, and sometimes you're just around it, and sometimes you completely fail, and that's all right. You don't have to beat yourself up about, I would say, the failed attempts. I would never say like failing in the sense of like that you are doing something like a barbell bench press or so, and you're just like under the load. That's not what I'm referring to, but let's just say you have the rep target of like 12 in mind for one RER, and it turns out that it was only 11 for 0 RER. Is that really that big of a deal breaker? No, you still haven't used a high amount of hypertrophic stimulus due to being in a relative intensity range, etc., etc. So it's not really that big of a deal to actually then have an outcome like this. And then when it comes to the differentiation between optimal technique and then the stimulus provided, what does provide more of a stimulus? Having always 100% perfect technique with a little less load, or having then maybe some form or slight deviation? Maybe let's just say like it's 95% of a perfect form, but you are testing new territories, right? And what's then more important? And that is something that I think needs to be considered at times, to actually then take the risk of going up there with the slight deviation, but you don't want to be too aggressive over the next upcoming weeks, where then it turns from 95 down to 90, down to 85, down to 80, and then all of a sudden it becomes actually a different movement, right? But you have to take the risk of actually sometimes going to 95 and then work your way up to 100% again.
It's that not being afraid to like fail and learn. And this is why it's really interesting talking about this, because I think people might, they see sometimes, I would say, what the bros say. It's not always the bros, but let's just put it that way. And they say something like, touching new weights. And I can't remember what the exact saying is, but it's something like that, like testing myself with new weights or whatever. Yeah. And it's great because whilst there's some polar, like it's too polar, like an idea, or too, I don't know, it's an extreme idea, what have you, but there's a grain of truth to it. And I think there's so many things like that where maybe the bros, what have you, say these things, and it's like, there's always an element of truth to what they're saying. Like you can draw the knowledge there, and maybe you just pull it back a little bit, like we have, like we've talked about it, and people might hear what we've said and like, oh, you're talking about touching new weights. It's like, it kind of is that, but it's talking about it in a logical, systematic way that's kind of on the side of making sure you're pushing hard enough, but not pushing inappropriately hard, and getting there in a, like I said, a logical, graduated way, versus like just doing it for the sake of, I've never done. Like if I was just like, I've been doing 4 plates on the hack, I'm going to do 5 next week. So, fuck.
And it's very, very tough to figure out what it is that we're actually referring to and talk about. It's the same as when we are talking about the pump or soreness or so, because the perception of that individual can be quite different to what it is that we are experiencing. And I always like to compare it to seeing colors. Only because I perceive the color red to be a specific way, I have no way of figuring out how you perceive the color red, but we are basically talking about the same thing, right? But we are just perceiving things differently. And also there, I think it's just a matter of a deliberate practice. And I think that this holds true to everything around training. Each and every single training session is a training session. You don't have to have it all figured out. You're not a pro. No one is expecting it to from you to actually be a professional, right? And even the professionals are still learning. And I think that's super important. And it's quite ironic if you really think about it, that people who have been training for 5 years or so get so frustrated about not having it figured out when if you were to confront them with a different outcome or in a different situation of like, I don't know, take music, for example. Would you expect to be like the best player or one of the best players in the world after 5 years of practicing? And especially when the practicing time is maybe only 1 hour for 6 days per week. Probably not, right? So it takes much, much longer time to actually be very good at things, because also it's kind of motor unit recruitment, so motor skills, neurological pathways that first need to be built over a longer period of time. So probably before you're actually very, very good at things and very much in control over your training, over nutrition, all that kind of stuff, 10 years, maybe 20 years have passed, because that is also probably what it is that you would need to invest in other fields as well in order to be decently good.
Yeah.
But people don't really think about it when it comes to training, which is kind of ironic, isn't it?
I think you get that. It's almost like you get those newbie gains. So you get then this like Dunning-Kruger effect of like, oh, like I can just do this, and I know I've got the secret. It's so easy. And then you hit intermediate, and you're like, oh fuck, I have to think about things a little bit harder. This is now too tough. And I think a lot of people give up at that point, and they then don't get to that advanced level. But it's interesting you talked about kind of time invested to become like a master of something, because it reminds me, again, David Epstein. Overrun. It works. Yeah. But I think I think it's Malcolm Gladwell or whatever. He has like a 10,000 hour rule to become an expert. Yeah. Obviously, this has been very much like a rule of thumb. But when you actually work out 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, how much time that actually is, it's fucking, like you said, decades it ends up being. And sure, it's going to be different for everyone. We learn at different rates. Maybe you have a master in your corner, Obi-Wan, and you're like teaching your Padawan, and you've got a coach, basically, is what I'm trying to say there. And they can level you up much more quickly, but like everyone has to somewhat learn it for themselves, and you have to apply yourself. And so it's like you said with your eating behaviors and habits, that's something where in the last, 5 years or so, you've had so much, well, even less time than that, so much more control over it. It's like you've suddenly leveled up to like mastering that in a sense.
So just to be a little bit nitpicky, I would question the 10,000 hour rule quite substantially, because
it has been.
It's just,
yeah.
All right. Yeah.
No, it totally has been. It's like he kind of put it out there, and then people grasped onto it. It's this is a definite black and white thing. It's like it's a general idea that maybe it takes. I
wasn't aware of that, but then it absolutely makes sense, because I can think of many skills that don't really require a lot of time, and then there are definitely skills that need decades before you're actually becoming good at it, right? But I think as a general rule of thumb, definitely it's a good idea around it, because it's like you said, 10,000 hours of something is a long time, right? And it's unfortunate though, because so many people miss that kind of small piece of the puzzle, and that is time of just being invested in something. Goes a long, long way. And how can you then be frustrated so just thinking about it and considering the things that we've talked about, right? How can you be so frustrated about something? Maybe also a suboptimal training session when it's just kind of a blip overall, right? Because if you really think about it, what is it? You're doing kind of one set, right? One set, well, yeah, all right. It can actually be quite damaging if you're not careful. But if we consider that building a decent physique, if you're not genetically blessed, takes 10, 20 years, we've seen it with so many people. You yourself, best example for that. It takes such a long time in order to do this. And then if you then reflect back on it, is one set really going to make that much of a difference? No. Right? So why are you then stressing so much out about it? And also, once again, this is practice. You're trying to do your very best each and every single session, each and every single time you're going in, and you don't always need to bring it all the time. You don't need to be 100% all the time, right? Because I think that, once again, having skin in the game is much, much better than not doing anything at all, right? Or being absolute hardcore all the time and then falling off the wagon because you're burned out, so right? And then considering all of those things, it puts things in perspective and makes it so that you stress so much less about the entire thing about training and nutrition, when you know it's just about like deliberately practicing over a long enough time frame. And that long enough time frame is unfortunately something that many people don't really think about too much, because we're speaking about years of doing those mundane things on a consistent basis. And I know that if you were to say to someone like, so if you want to become a great, I'm always falling back to music. I don't know why. Music. So if you want to become a great piano player, it will take you at least now the next 20 years, and you have to practice at least 1 hour per day, 6 times per week. Would you be willing to do this? And I don't think that many people would. But that is exactly what bodybuilding is.
Yeah, absolutely is. I had a point and it's completely gone through my brain and out the other side and lost it. It's all right. But it's actually, yeah, when you put it that way of like it's an hour for 6 days a week, 6 days of the week, and for like a couple of decades, are you willing to put that in? It's like that upfront cost is so scary to a lot of people, which is why we talk about like trying to enjoy the process. So I remembered what it was. I think a lot of things, and this is almost potentially when you start becoming a little bit of an expert bodybuilder, as it were. They talk about it again. David Epstein, in his book, he talks about it with chess players, where they can almost read 2 steps ahead of the game, but they have to have been playing for so long to be able to get to that point where they can start reading where the other person's going to go. But I think for like you and me and many of the listeners, we're at that point where you can almost know how you're going to perform before like you go into it. Like you almost understand, I have all these habits down in my day-to-day life where I just automatically tick all the boxes of nutrient timing, protein, like carbohydrates. Like it's not difficult for us anymore. Whereas I think people don't realize that when they start, and they just get super put off. But it's like, but a lot of it starts becoming just like you're not reading the game, but you've got those habits in place. So it's not something you have to consciously really think about, like technique and form. When you first get into that, like you have to think about all these cues. And like, I know when I first started squatting, I was like running it all through my head. But now it's like you said, when I get under the bar for a hack squat or I'm doing a chest press, I'm not thinking about any of those cues. I'm just like, okay, I have like a number in my head normally that I want to achieve. Let's concentrate like fuck to get that number, basically.
Yeah. That's also why I can be on my phone in between sets. It's not that it takes me out completely of my training zone, because my training zone is when I set foot into the gym. This is where it's then on, right? And it's not that it's kind of like in between the sets, I'm shutting down my computer and then I have to restart it, rebooting it, right, in order then to get going again. It's just I'm still there, right? It's just that's
someone trolls you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, and sometimes I've even realized it here today, funny enough, Steve, that currently I wasn't really as focused because I was distracted by other things that are happening right now around my life, right? So without going too much into detail, but I'm very much concerned about everything that is going on in the world, the entire macro situation, so macroeconomic situation, and so, right? Especially, I'm questioning then, like, I have 2 kids now, I'm raising them, and of course, I think that every person and every parent is going through that. Maybe not the boomer generation, because they had kind of a very decent time, but there were still times of like Vietnam War and all that kind of stuff, was quite concerning. But of course, I'm then kind of, what the fuck did I do here in putting 2 kids into, one kid into the world, the other one I'm raising, and what will happen to them in the future, right? What will the planet look like, and all that kind of stuff is massively concerning me. And when I got up in the morning here, I was just like, that thought that haunted me extremely much, and I couldn't really deliver a good training session because I was just too distracted by that. This is not happening often, but sometimes that's just what it is. And also there, it falls back to, I'm still there, still doing the job, right? I suffered like 1-2 reps here and there just due to lack of concentration, maybe. But still, I was going in there and doing something, right? Which is probably still hypertrophic enough overall. And I think that those days are also important to talk about and acknowledge. And this is more the exception than the rule. And it's also very important, I think, for people to understand that it's all right to have days like these, as long as it's not the norm. And as long as you try to control all of the variables as best as you can. And it's something that Cliff Wilson just made a post about just recently. And you even said so yourself about putting yourself in an environment where you are increasing the likelihood of the best outcome. Right?
Yeah, the analogy was actually fantastic, because I initially had in my presentation an analogy for back growth. Back growth for muscle growth as an advanced lifter was like watching Mike Israetel's back hair grow. Like it happens, but it's really slow. You can't even notice it, kind of that element. But he talked about having this bucket of water and how, when you have that bucket of water, it's evaporating. You can't see it. But if you put it in an environment where it's more likely to happen under the sun and it's warm, it's going to evaporate faster. And that's like us as advanced lifters, put everything you can in terms of like the right nutrition, the right training practice, the right recovery, sleep, supplementation, what have you. Do everything you can to make sure that you're growing. You can't see it necessarily, but it should be happening. Like it's like that trust the process, but you almost don't have to trust the process because it's principle based, like hypertrophy style programming for everything. So it's very much that. And
now it goes deep because then it's a matter of just like doing it for long enough. And then by the end of it, will you look back and regret all of the years that you've put into it? Or will it be that you've actually enjoyed it because in the moment you've enjoyed the process of trying to get better?
Yeah.
And I think that it's also applicable to something like a job, right? Don't seek happiness, seek satisfaction is what Mark Andreessen just once said. And I think that holds so true to every aspect of life. Because if you're chasing happiness, it's very unlikely that it's going to just occur in front of you. And it's kind of like, I don't know, chasing the carrot in front of you. Right? You will never get there. But if you're chasing just satisfaction, and satisfaction can come in many, many different ways, right? You can actually be quite satisfied in just like ticking off some boxes. Will it give you a lot of happiness in the moment? Probably not, right? But that just accumulates, and then over time and chasing or having the satisfaction in your life, probably you will be a much, much happier individual independent of the outcome. And that's also why, for me personally, it has become just like part of my identity, where it's like I just enjoy going to the gym. Whether I'm becoming the biggest person in the world, which for obvious reasons won't really happen anymore,
for
right?
Either of us.
But I would still do it independent of that, because it's just the lifting and the journey and trying to just become a better person, right? Physically speaking, mentally speaking, it's just what gives me satisfaction. And I think that this is way more valuable than chasing some kind of goal. So, of course, you can still have goals, but just being too fixated or make your happiness and satisfaction dependent on then the outcome, it's just kind of even a fool's errand.
Yeah. It's the same. It's like we never focused on it might sound bad as like Revive Stronger, but we never like set ourselves business goals or outcomes. It's the same. Sometimes I've looked and I've been like, I think we should hit this number of followers on like Instagram and on YouTube by this time. But I never actually set like income like goals or targets. We've never set out.
That's the problem for us.
Maybe. But I think there's something to just doing our best work, working with. Like I'm at a point in like the career and where Revive Stronger is. If you asked me 5 years ago if I thought we'd be here, but no way. Like that's we've completely like grown massively from there. It's like maybe to get to the next stage we need to have more of that, and it's kind of the same with like your physique. If you want kind of a bit loftier goals, maybe you need to outsource it and get a coach or what have you. But it's very much like that process. Like, and if you're enjoying that process, no matter what the outcome is, like you've enjoyed that process of getting there. Because I think some people seek that happiness and they want those kind of short-term satisfaction feedback. They just go hopping to different things all the time because they're like, oh, what am I good at? And they just like, I know it's good to try things, but you might be equally bad at everything or good at everything. Like you're probably not going to be absolutely outstanding, amazing at something. It's good to try things when you're younger, especially. But once you found something that you honestly enjoy and you have passion for, like, and it provides you a lot of happiness in that like you said, ticking the boxes, you enjoy that process, you're probably going to get that outcome way more likely than a bunch of things that maybe you could even be better at, but you just don't enjoy doing. Did that make sense?
Yeah, but I was just like, what is it that we're actually talking about?
I don't know. I don't know. There was a thought. Oh, I was thinking, let's bring it back to like practicality. Maybe you need to be watching like some Ronnie Coleman videos before the gym.
Yeah.
Because then you can stop thinking about the world economic problem.
Yeah. So the thing is that when times are, of course, good, right, you tend to build that habit around watching still the news, right? Because you want to be, I don't know, it also there gives you kind of happiness as well, right? Because it's kind of a satisfaction also there, and also a confirmation that things are great, you're doing well. It's kind of a confirmation for yourself, of just a reassurance, like things are going well at the moment, so be happy. And then you have built that habit, and when news are then worsening, you want to stay up to date in hopes that things are actually turning to become better, right? And you're just like, I don't know, desperate in hoping that it just turns around. And most of the time, these things can last, like, as we've seen in history, decades sometimes.
I'll tell you something that gave me, this is going to sound ridiculous, because it is
Not
ridiculous.
Watching news.
No, I did watch the news. Well, I didn't watch it. I follow BBC News on Instagram, and this video came up. And this is, I don't know, this might say a lot about me, but this is the news I looked into. And this was this woman who basically, they were interviewing her because she's drawing on bananas. And she bruises the skin of the banana. She doesn't actually draw with ink. She like bruises the skin of it and has designs. And I was just like, how is this in the news? Yeah. This is newsworthy stuff.
So the thing is, I've tried to think about like, okay, should I just like drop watching the news on a daily basis? Maybe just down to at least once per day, or maybe just like once per week. I still am in an inner conflict also there, because I don't want to be ignorant to reality. I don't just want to be shut my eyes for what's actually happening in the world. Maybe watching it and make me feel bad in the moment is actually a positive thing. I know how fucked up that sounds, but maybe this causes me then to be better prepared for whatever. I don't even know for what, you know?
Does it change what you do?
No, and even if something is happening, I probably can't do anything about it, you know?
Buy a bunch of dumbbells ready for the next.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I hope to get out of it, but I think staying informed, at least right now, while I don't have a good explanation for it, I also don't want to be the person who's, once again, ignorant to what's going on around him. While in reality, though, sometimes ignorant is very much bliss, especially when you think about that you only have a certain amount of years on the planet, while you don't want to neglect certain aspects of life, certain aspects of responsibilities. You want to make sure to actually live a very fulfilling life and not just like worry the entire time about things that may or may not happen. Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of it. I think in terms of consuming news is like weigh up the good versus bad. Like, is it just causing more anxiety in life? If you pull away from it, do you get a sense of relief? Same with like social media. Like sometimes if you feel like you're on social media too much, you're just consuming. If you pull away, do you get like feelings of, I don't know, lower stress? It's like, oh, maybe you want to spend less time on that platform. Yeah. Or you need a break now and then from it. Like you need a deload from training. You need a deload from consuming the news or whatever it might be. Yeah. So yeah, it's Charlotte's very keen on the news as well, whereas I'm like completely, unless I see a banana article, and then I'll look into it. I'll be like,
same way around with Katie and I. Katie, she doesn't really watch the news.
You balance each other. Because
it really concerns her a lot whenever she watches some kind of negative things, especially when we actually went to the snowboarding trip. That was the weekend after Russia invaded Ukraine, and she was just like shit scared, and I was also very concerned as well, right? And ever since then, she actually then dropped kind of watching news as well, because it just concerned her too much, right? So I can definitely see that it may sometimes may not be a good thing, and kind of it's the same when it comes to training, because we want to also, of course, apply to things that are relevant to our field. Worrying too much or just watching, you brought up like social media, watching the entire time like social media, seeing all those amazing physiques, all those strong individuals, does it help you, or does it actually cause you to enjoy the thing that you're doing less?
Yeah. And actually, I think on the note of social media, sometimes you can, again, use it maybe the wrong way. And it just, I think for a lot of people, can just lead them to doubting themselves all the time, because they're like, oh, this person's doing this, they've got success. Oh, this person's doing this, they've got success. And they get really lost in these different methods. And it's like, well, if you've got a principle, and this is something I talked about in my presentation as well, actually, on that note, they are probably going to be live to sell soon. So if you're interested,
the London seminar, you mean?
Yeah, the London seminar presentations. Yes. So but it's something I talked about in terms of like just having confidence in your approach, boiling it down to principles. If you're progressing and seeing like if you're looking at your physique and where you think you should be in terms of progression, in terms of level of advancement, if you're pretty close to that, you're probably in a really good position. And don't keep questioning yourself. Don't see like the latest PubMed study that says, I don't know, you should do drop sets or whatever. Like, it's whatever it is, like have confidence in your approach and execute. If social media is taking you from that, maybe I've done this before where I've just like hidden people. Like I'm not going to unfollow them because there's no reason to do that. Maybe I'll just hide them for a little bit because it's just getting into my headspace. It's just whatever it could be for whatever reason, that can be helpful. Yeah,
Connor Steen, our man from Canada, a pro natural bodybuilder, by the way, he made a fantastic post that was actually then highlighting people from the pre-steroid area having a tremendous physique. Back then, they didn't really have commercial gyms with a lot of machines and all that kind of stuff. And he was like using, I can't really recall exactly what
isometrics.
He said. Exactly. Right. And he had a tremendous physique. And that just goes once again to show the message behind it once again is that we don't really need those fancy things, fancy equipments, fancy methodologies or whatever, right? It really boils down to genetics. That's for sure. Genetics is just the biggest factor of them all. And then in the end, just going out there and just doing something, right? Doing something over a long enough time frame and doing it probably with the right intensity. And the thing is, right now, some people know a little bit more than others about training and nutrition and probably how to get from A to B in the most efficient manner. But if we really am honest about kind of muscle growth in it for itself, so the proper physical mechanisms behind it, we are still kind of clueless, right? And that can either be kind of sad, if we think about it, or it can be also there, once again, quite freeing and allow you to just go in there and do just the things that you want to some extent, of course, right? Poser ball squats, don't know, could probably still work out for the genetically blessed. But once again, what I'm trying to say is just, what I want to say is that for the vast majority of people going in there, doing training sessions and doing that at the right intensity is probably already kind of most of the work.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's that point of if you're, I don't know, hyper focused on having to have this, I'm just going to randomly say a name of a different manufacturer of machine, but like a Paramount hack squat, and you need to have it perfectly banded in the last 25% of the range of motion. Otherwise, you're not going to grow as big quads as you possibly can. It's like, well, like, I don't think you need to stress that much about it. Probably a really good, like a barbell back squat's probably pretty good. Maybe there are better tools you can use, but there's lots and lots of tools, and you don't need to get hyper focused on those factors. In fact, like exercise selection comes after like volume and intensity. You could have the best exercises, but if you don't have enough volume or the right intent, you're not going to grow. It's like you said with this guy, he clearly is not doing the like isometric contractions. I don't think anyone's going to be thinking that's going to make you the biggest, but he has good genetics. He worked really hard, and over time he got a fantastic physique. And so it kind of comes back to that. And like you said, that could stress people out because they want like the perfect, most optimal things, like because that doesn't actually exist and you can't know what it is and it might change over time even, that should be freeing to you. It's like being, I don't know, on the money in terms of every single macro. You can't know that you're absolutely consuming that many. You also can't know that you're absolutely expending this so much. And like scale weight, you can't know exactly what's changed precisely there in terms of water weight versus like fat or what have you, or muscle. But we can know enough, and we have kind of general ideas and concepts, and it should be freeing for you and de-stress you.
And I know where this is coming from because people don't really want to waste time. But in that, you're overthinking it. You are actually then wasting time. And
Yes.
it's very, also there, it's very ironic if you think about it, because the thing that they fear the most is exactly what they end up doing with their actions. It's the exact same thing, just to make it a little bit more imaginable for people. You probably have heard of those kind of relationships where one person is super jealous and he's also afraid at the same time that she's then kind of seeing other men and cheating on him. But in that, he's then not allowing her to actually go meet some friends, maybe go out, that he's trusting her and then going out, right? He's exactly doing what he's the most afraid of. He's pushing her away, probably into the hands of someone else. And that's the same thing here as well. You don't want to waste time in that you're doing the wrong thing, but in that you're always finding and trying and just testing things out. I have nothing against experimentation, right? But if that's the main bulk of the work in the gym, then something is wrong, and then you're probably actually wasting time. Same goes for nutrition, by the way.
You've been watching Love Island, haven't you?
No, I haven't. It's just funny because in my close circle, there's exactly this. And this is not an uncommon thing, I think. It's not the first time that I heard it. In that situation, though, it is that they are married. They have like 2 kids, have a house together. And he was just like overly jealous, right? And always kind of saying to her, like, you're going to leave me for someone else, when there was never really a problem. And then that built up over years. And guess what is going on right now?
Oh, no.
She's seeing someone else.
It's real life Love Island.
It is. It is.
Well, Love Island is real life, but it's very close to home. So,
but go ahead.
I was going to say it's kind of that paralysis by analysis type of deal.
Yes.
Like people just overthink it to the point of which they never actually get that experience. And this is where, again, to kind of give favor to the bros, I kind of feel bad calling, like, just using this term bros, but people kind of know what you mean. It's kind of like saying clean and dirty food. People know what you mean. They fucking do work. They don't think so much a lot of the time, and they have great physiques a lot of the time because they just fucking put in hard work. And that's like, that's 90% of the way there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that if we were to just like think about something else, you were worrying about, once again, going back to playing a music instrument, of like messing up kind of Stairway to Heaven. I don't know why I was thinking about that song, right? Just like Wayne's World at the moment of just like me saying that, no Stairway to Heaven. But you're worrying about not being able to play this like perfectly, when in reality you have never had a guitar in your hand your entire life, right? So before you actually then, not having put in the work and effort, why are you stressing about things that may or may not be in the future? So basically coming back to the things that I'm worrying about, are the things that may happen in the future, but maybe they won't happen as well. Right? So before you haven't actually then put in like 10 years of like proper training, just going in there, like the term we've brought up a couple of times now, like a bro, just go in there, hit it hard, try to eat well, right? You don't really need to stress about those things, right? And then once things are slowing down, once you're massively injured or so, no, this is just a joke, but once things are slowing down or so, and you you've realized that this is actually something that you want to pursue for the next couple of years, and it wasn't just like a fluke for the moment where it was just like, yeah, I've seen people doing this over on Instagram and I wanted to give it a try, and then after a year, the entire thing that you spent time on over that year time frame was just like thinking about like the perfect split, when in reality that year could have better spent, especially for newbie gains, just to go in there, train hard, probably even eat whatever you want and still grow some muscle mass. And that's the thing, right? I think that unless you haven't spent a lot of time, don't fall victim and don't do the mistake of overthinking things too much. There's a time and place for it, but the 1 hour of training session that you have, use it to actually then train and not use it to think about like how to optimize the program. Yeah. This is something that you then can do for the rest or remainder of the day.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It's kind of like have a good plan, execute it. When it's starting to fail you, that's when you start thinking about it a bit, and then make the modifications, go again.
Yeah.
Rather than just continually trying to tweak and modify and obsess about optimal. That will definitely hold people back. And I think that's where and we're part of that. I would say we're part of the solution and problem at the same time, in that we have so much information out there, which I hope really helps people, and hopefully chats like this really help people not get into the information trap. Mm-hmm. But also that information is amazing because it levels people's knowledge up so far. But sometimes that knowledge almost is like a double-edged sword, where they're so freaking smart and they're clued up about it all that they're just like, oh, but if I do this, this happens. This is it's just, go do. Like, stop thinking.
We've brought up so many analogies this podcast, but I have another one, and that is I don't know if you're into motor racing, like motorbike racing, so MotoGP or something like Formula One. I think it's kind of applicable to each and every one of those motorsports, right? The racer sits in the car, right, feels the machine. And then, based on his riding or driving style, he then gives feedback to the mechanics and says, like, I think that we should actually fine-tune XYZ because the car doesn't really behave in the corners the way that I intended to. Right? And he can only come to that conclusion once he is then out of the car again, then discussing things with the mechanic. Once they took care of it, it's about going into the car again, driving around the circuit, and then coming back and once again assess the situation. Instead, he's not in the car and be like, shitty corners, shitty handling here. I'm just like getting out of the car now. That's just too fucked up. That's not how you're then improving, right? You do the lab, you get adjusted to also then the situation, see whether this works. And if not, hey, next round will perhaps be a better round.
Yeah. And that's why just like this continuous being consistent is so important, and you continuously put in that effort, make the tweaks, keep going, and you get better and better at it. And that's why also the journey looks so different for every individual, because we will travel at slightly different pace. We will have different experiences, whether that be like the program we're doing or us as an individual, our environment around us, whether or not we can commit a certain amount at various times, our injury proclivity or what have you. And you have to just eventually, and this is where when individualization becomes most important, is in those advanced levels. And that's really the only time you have all the experience accumulated where you can truly individualize. Whereas people will start, like people, and we probably to some extent have done this, like bash on like generic programs. Whereas generic programs can be great for that starter person who has like no idea what they're doing. But then you run those so many times where it's like, this really isn't stimulating this enough, or like this is beating me up here. This just doesn't feel great. Like 5-3-1 for me, like my legs, my lower body lifts like did really well. My upper body was just like completely like, what's going on? I swear I'm getting smaller. Anyway, and then you individualize when you need to in those later stages once you've got that experience.
I mean, I can only repeat myself of what it is that we've brought up so often, that the things that we're talking about are most of the things that we've either failed at ourselves, went through ourselves, or have seen dozens of people going through themselves as well and not really working out. It's not that we are pulling those things out of our arse of like, yeah, I've read a PubMed study that has looked at 12 individuals. We've often even experienced that ourselves, and this is also there falling back to kind of wasting time, which it is that I don't think anyone is interested in and can be avoided if someone just listens at times. And that is also something that I always bring up with each and every one of my athletes by now, whenever they are transitioning out of a long cutting phase. I say and prepare them for the time afterwards. Don't give me that shit that you think that you have it all under control, right? Don't go for that hyper-palatable stuff. Just give yourself the time, right? Because chances are that you are someone like Steve Hall, for example, who just easily makes that transition. I would even say, though, 9 out of 10 times is not you. And you will fail miserably, especially because you're not a skilled dieter and you have no idea what to expect after a diet. And then all of a sudden, you think like, yeah, I will have those cookies. And voila, all of the cookies are gone. You became the cookie monster. And also, you are looking like the cookie monster afterwards.
He's pretty slim.
He is, right. Hairy, yeah. His skin is hanging big time. Probably because he went through several cutting and gaining cycles, and his skin is just so loose now.
Protein cookies, that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But something like this, for example, because I've seen those things happening so often already, and I even went through it myself, that there is a challenge in that time frame, right? And chances are you're not the outlier.
And that's actually a really good take-home point for everyone there in terms of like most of us, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, are average. And so we are not outliers, and we are like like that's what average is, right? We're more than likely to be average. If we weren't all average, mostly average, then it just wouldn't be average. Yeah. It just sounds completely ridiculous what I just said there, but it boils down to that. And actually, I could go on to a new topic, but that's where your experience really helps. And that's where people can really help themselves out, is take the experience of other people who have been through it, because that almost gives you those like level up points ahead of time. So, but yeah, I think this has been an interesting, good chat. We quite often don't have an idea of, we had no idea what we're going to talk about, and then it just comes out. And I enjoyed it.
Such as on the toilet.
You have no idea what's going to come. Is it a wee? Poo? How solid.
And then it just comes out. No, absolutely. I mean, the wisdom is now hopefully being reflected in something like the mustache I'm wearing. People have given me like very nice compliments about it.
Oh, yeah.
I very much appreciate that. And if that doesn't really show how wise we are by now, then I don't know what else. Long hair? White hair?
White hair. Oh, Gandalf.
Yeah, Gandalf.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, that would
and
be
a big
amazing.
beard.
Yeah. I've seen, so just on a side note, I think it was Harry who posted that meme, or it was kind of a small video from Gandalf, and I freaking laughed my ass off, because it was like Gandalf, it was Lord of the Rings, and he said he was kind of cursing to one of the hobbits, right? And then it was like really that actor, right, who watched then the movie, and he said like, they took it out of context completely, right? It just makes me look like a complete arsehole in that situation, right? Amazing video.
I saw it, but I haven't watched Lord of the Rings in so long. I can't even remember what it's referring to. Yeah. So I was like, I want to get this, but it was lost. So hopefully the listeners are more clued in than I am with that.
Cool. Then guys, as always, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for the constant support, and also commenting in the comment section below. Sometimes we may be a little bit slow on responding on those comments, but we are reading every one of those. Also, Steve has brought it up over on Instagram as well, and I've even talked about it just recently as well, that I was in the midst of creating the the guide to training all of the muscle groups that we've also recorded here throughout the Improvement Season podcast. I've now put it into the newsletter, so whenever you're signing up via the website, for example, to the newsletter, you will be then on the list for then that guide, and then all the other good things that will come along with the newsletter as well, such as a couple of freebies every now and then, which is something that people I think will appreciate, and probably if you haven't signed up yet, you will appreciate as well. So guys, sign up for the newsletter, leave here a like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I guess I'll speak to you next week. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.